Hi YouTube, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about pruning and staking tomatoes. Stay tuned. Okay, so I know, elephant in the room. Yes, I did not put out a video on Tuesday. Life gets in the way. I was canning my butt off and I needed to get it done. I also did not make it out into the garden for several days, and it shows. I'll show you in a minute. But after 2 weeks-ish of growth in ground, these tomatoes have just exploded and they're actually starting to fall over. Are you filming me? And they have a whole lot of suckers on them. Now, this is indeterminate varieties of tomatoes. Determinate varieties don't get very tall. You let them bush out. Otherwise, you don't get that many tomatoes. But indeterminates will keep growing as tall as you give them support for. So I also have them relatively close together. Now this bed, they are 22 inches apart, which is what I did last year. My block bed, they are 20 inches apart because I'm testing it. I'm testing my boundaries. These are still definitely good because this is how far apart I grew them last year. But because they are close together, they're not in a cage, I'm not letting them bush out at all, I'm pruning them down to a single stem. One stem, which means all the suckers have to come off. Now this is a young sucker. Very easy to pinch off, just like that. If you let them go and don't get them right away, they get bigger, thicker, they start to push the leaf stem down. You have to cut those. You might rip your plant if you just snap them off. But the smaller ones, this is your main stem, and your leaf stem makes like an L. The suckers come out diagonally from them. This one is small, so you can just pinch that one off. But at the top, sometimes it can be confusing as to what part is the sucker and what part is the main stem. And last year, I accidentally topped a couple of plants thinking I knew which one at the top was the sucker and which one wasn't. So from then on, and I will continue this year, I'm going to wait and not do the top, let it get a little bit bigger so you can more clearly see what is the sucker and what is your main stem. Now this one is pretty long as a sucker. And eventually, if I left this on the plant, it would grow an entirely new tomato plant, which would take up too much space here. So they gotta go. Now, if you want to start another round of tomatoes, this is a great way to do it. This is one of the bigger suckers, the one I said needed cut off. This is plenty big to root in water or put straight in the ground. I never tried it straight in the ground, I've only rooted them in water first. But you put it in water for a few days to a week, it'll start growing roots on it, and then you can transplant it into your garden and you have another tomato coming up. If you have a lot of humidity problems, your tomato plants might get blight and die before the frost comes. Around here, the heritage varieties do seem to get blight before the end of the season and die out. So I like to have a second round going. Last year I planted my second round way too late, so I had a lot of green tomatoes. But I still had some tomatoes. Now this year I've acquired very many different varieties of tomatoes, so I'm not saving any suckers this year because I've got more seeds that I'm starting now for my second round. I've got some that have been in for a couple weeks and they're about that big. And I've got some seeds that I still need to start because I didn't have very good germination. But that's how I'm doing my second round this year. Last year, I saved suckers. Now, I do not really want to grow 25 different varieties of tomatoes every year. So this year is more about trying a lot of different ones to pick my favorites. And I will be paying attention to which ones die out from blight, which ones taste the best, which ones produce the most. Things like that, so that, you know, maybe I'll only have 10 varieties next year. That would be a lot more manageable. Because I don't have the space for like 100 tomato plants. I don't. I have, I think, 24-ish tomato plants in the ground right now. I have 18 more about this size in the house, and I think 6 more varieties that I am starting from seed. So, yeah, I have a lot of plants. I don't have room for more, and I would actually like to have more varieties of the ones that I like the most. But I don't know which ones those are, because in my lifetime, I haven't really tried that many varieties, and there are a lot of tomato varieties out there. I have found a couple favorites that I will always grow. I love my pink ox hearts. They are super delicious. They're very sweet, very good, great on sandwiches. I don't need that many cherry tomatoes. And last year I had 3 different varieties. The yellow pear, which most of us didn't really care for that much. I grew the sweetie tomato, which we did like, but it was just a little sweet red cherry tomato. There wasn't anything super special about it. And I also grew the super sweet 100, which was a hybrid, and it tasted the same as the sweetie tomato. There's no point for me to grow the super sweet 100 when I could just grow the sweetie. This year, I've added the blueberries cherry tomato. I've got a black cherry tomato that I still need to start from seed. I think there might have been another one, but maybe not. But I'm trying so many different varieties of tomatoes this year so that I can pick my favorites, because we don't need that many cherry tomatoes. We need more paste-like tomatoes, stuff that can go into sauce, because we do use a lot of sauce. Another thing that tomatoes really need is pruning of the lower leaves. Any leaves that are touching the ground will most likely get sick and diseased, and if you don't pull them off, that can spread. When you first put them in the ground, though, usually you're burying them deeper, so the leaves are all close to the ground. You can't just cut them all off then, because then you'd have no plant. So as the plant grows up, you will need to trim off the lower leaves, and you need a good 12 to 18 inches of space at the bottom with no leaves. As the plant's growing up, don't cut them all at once. But these here definitely need to come off because they are touching the ground. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 leaves here that are touching the ground. Now this has enough on top that it can support that loss at one time. This one here is not touching the ground now, but as it gets bigger, it probably will. Eventually that one will come off too. As for actually tying them up, now I've got the furring strips in, which are actually screwed to this bed. They're just pounded into the ground in the block bed. And I like to use the stretchy tape. It's very easy to, you tie it around and then you just pull and it'll break off. You don't even have to cut it. It's not really reusable. If you want something reusable, well, it also depends on what you're trellising your tomatoes on, but they do have all kinds of clips and stuff. But with so many tomato plants, that sounds expensive. And mine relatively is a small scale tomato growing compared to some people, especially in this community. I don't really find that to be an economical option. But if you're only having a few plants, it may be very worthwhile to you because you can reuse them every year. This is not that expensive. It's not reusable, but it's not that expensive. Like, this will last me a while, even with all the tomatoes I have. But the sky's the limit. The nice thing about this is even if you get it up against the plant, it'll stretch, so it won't pinch the stem off. If you're using anything that doesn't stretch, you can still use it. You just have to leave extra space for the stem to grow. Because by the end of the season, this stem will be a good 2 inches in diameter, possibly more. So you need to leave room for that growth, or it will pinch off the plant and it's going to cause problems. But I have used nylon twine, yarn. You could cut up like old strips of like a t-shirt material that has some stretch to it. Use what you have. Just remember, if it doesn't stretch, to leave some space. Leave it loose. Some of these are a little bit far away from the post, but they will be fine. All it needs is to not fall over. When it gets taller, it'll be up against the post, so it won't even really move. Right now it can move a little, but that's it. Now this one had already fallen over, and so it already has this bend in it, which will make it really easy for tying up. And this bed is all done. Everybody's up off the ground. Some of them are still a little bit bent over because it started to bend up towards the light while it was laying on the ground. I still have to weed in the middle, but the tomatoes are all good for a while. As for the tomatoes in the block bed, that is also where I planted a lot of my cool weather crops this year. And our weather was extra cold, like right after planting. So it took them a good long while to get germinated and get going. And then it got hot really fast. So, of course, most of them bolted. But I thought, well, at least I'll get some seed. I had not tried to get seed from radishes, carrots, or cabbage and spinach before. I did not realize how tall the carrots got. Because, you know, carrots don't get all that tall. Yeah. Of course, the carrots that went to seed are actually the ones I planted in the fall. They're finally blooming, but they're more than 4 feet tall. They're really pretty. They're very soft and fluffy. And a bug crawling on them. Got them. But then there is radishes and cabbage and spinach in this mess. For size reference, that's the radishes. And that's the carrots. And I'm 5'6". Yeah. So, I mean, that would be fine, except I've got tomatoes planted behind all of them. Those two not too bad, because at least the radishes fell over. And I've got new beets there that are still growing. They're not bolted or anything. But then starts the carrots. And the two tomatoes on the end, not doing so well. They're still healthy, they're just really small. And they haven't grown a whole lot since they've been in there. So I don't need this much seed. I don't. Next year I'm gonna have to put anything I want to save for seed in a separate bed and just let it go to town. Because I'm gonna have to pull these out before they're done. Although I am starting to get some of the little seed pods. Let's grab one. I'm not even sure if this is radish or cabbage because it looks like they both did this. Which, these little seed pods, they are edible. Kind of like radish, so it's probably from a radish. But the cabbage plants kind of look the same, so I'm not really sure. They are edible, but I need my tomatoes. I need my tomato sandwiches. I need my tuna sandwiches with tomato. I need my BLT sandwiches. I need my tomatoes. So I'll leave a few, but most of these gotta come out. Yeah. Pruning tomatoes by hand, you will get black stuff. Looks like dirt. It's like a tomato tar or something. It's from the tomato plants themselves. It does not come off with soap and water. However, I learned from Jess at Roots and Refuge that white vinegar on it will take it right off. So thanks for coming along with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And if you have any other tips or tricks for your tomatoes, leave them down in the comments. So thanks for watching. And remember, life's an adventure. Thanks for joining me in mine. God bless.